Well, welcome everyone. I'm so delighted to see so many people here and from so many different places. We've got a few continents covered. And I know that today's presentation will be a really valuable experience and something that we can use in our clinical work with people suffering the after effects of psychological trauma. The slide, please. So I'd like to begin by describing a bit about our group and what we do. My name is Maureen O'Reilly-Landry. I'm the founder and co-chair with Dr. Patricia O'Gorman of the Hospital Health and Addiction Workers, Patients and Families Working Group. And we're members of the COVID Psychology Task Force, which was established by 14 divisions of the American Psychological Association. And we're housed within the trauma division of the APA. Our group consists of psychologists and other mental health professionals who came together in March 2020 with a mission. We wanted to address the psychological trauma we all knew was coming our way. And sadly, we weren't wrong. And as trauma-informed psychologists and other practitioners, we've been working since then to apply our understanding of the really complex interplay between the mind, body, and the social context in order to help reduce psychological trauma that was wrought by the pandemic and everything that people had to deal with during this time. Our work group in particular has focused on stress and trauma in medical, health, and addiction workers, as well as patients and their families. The next slide, please. Okay, so we have a website, resiliencyincovid.us, and that's a place to go for pandemic-related informational, educational, and also training resources on a wide range of topics related to the pandemic. We also have a blog called Psychological Trauma, Coping and Resilience, COVID-19 and Pandemics. In our blog, our group of practitioners, trauma-informed practitioners, we write about aspects of the pandemic, addressing issues related to the population that we're addressing, medical, mental health, and addiction professionals, as well as patients and families. Next, please. So now I'd like to introduce my co-chair, Dr. Patricia O'Gorman, who is an addiction and trauma expert. And she's going to say a few words about our group members.
Well, hello and welcome. We are an expanding group. As Maureen said, we cover a couple of continents. Our presenter today is speaking to you from Jerusalem. We have a member in Spain. We cover the East Coast from New York all the way down to Florida, and we're heading west. And we invite you to join us. Oh, we also have a member in Montreal. How did I forget that? Yes, so we have a Canadian member, a member in Texas. We're a group that came together with purpose and passion, and we invite you to join us. Although we started as just psychologists, we have nurses joining us now. Our newest member is a teacher. There is space for you. If you are interested, please email Maureen. Her email is right below, and just say, I'm interested in joining, and you'll get a link to our meetings. Thank you.
Or even just finding out more about the group with no commitment to join.
Right.
Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so the very first talk that we sponsored before we knew that this was going to turn into a series was in October 2021. And at that time, long COVID was really beginning to get a lot of news coverage, but so little was known about it. So we invited Dr. Ala Landa. She's a Columbia psychologist who studies mind-body disorders. And we invited her here to speak to our group, and then we invited some, other people who are interested to just kind of think through whether and how her research might apply to long COVID. And of course, it was completely, theoretical, hypothetical. There was not really any significant research at the time, but it was just kind of she helped us to think it through. And then what happened was a subgroup formed a little while later, and you can see the names of the people who are involved in this. They've forged connections, very strong connections with long COVID advocacy groups, and also sponsored a number of talks in this series. We had one just a few weeks ago, and then one of our own members, Dr. Sally Riggs, is going to be speaking in 2 weeks. Okay, the next slide, please. And so our second subgroup also came from a talk that was given in June. And the presentation was to address the psychological trauma in the ICU, with particular focus on the families and the staff. Now, this is a problem that always existed as long as there have been ICUs, but the pandemic, of course, brought that to everybody's attention. And then the people who had the misfortune to get COVID or something else that required ICU treatment, they suffered the double trauma of having to be in isolation and separated from their loved ones who, are the biggest source of support. And we focused on the healing power of relationships. And that was a presentation that I did with one of our wonderful graduate students, Denise Carballea. Okay, the next slide, please. All right, so I just briefly want to give you a sense of the range of the topics that we cover. At the top, we have Patricia O'Gorman, who's writing about teenagers and suicide by intentional overdose in children. And actually, I think she has seen them pretty young doing that. And then we have kind of at the other end, the more mundane, everyday sort of thing, where Bob Gordon, who is a member of our group, and then one of his students, Gabriela, I hope I get the name right, Norderman Sumariva.
So I need to just share this again, and my push here, dummy skills, which is what I call my PhD. I think this is good. Are we good?
We're good.
Okay, great. So I really appreciate being here, and I just want to share with you how privileged I feel to be part of this extraordinary group. It has turned into what I would call an international think tank, and we apply a lot of the things that we think about. So we brainstorm and then create, which is just a wonderful experience all around. And the welcoming nature of this group is also very special and has seen a lot of us through the pandemic. So thank you to all of you in terms of that. So I'm going to move into my slideshow. I have put it together. I did a 3-hour workshop on all of this a couple of weeks ago. So you're going to get a very condensed version, but I hope you'll find it very rich. So what I want to start out with is to tell you that people often ask me two primary questions. The first is what drew me to the trauma work that I do. And the second, more importantly, is how do I introduce this work and where do I start? Now, the first question I can answer succinctly, so I will now. And the second, I will respond to that as we go along. So my first memory, and this is really important, I think, to what shaped me to do this trauma work, is being in a bomb shelter at age 4 in Haifa, Israel, where I was born. And that was the 56 Sinai War, when Haifa was being bombed by an Egyptian ship from the sea. That was the first time that ever happened. And I remember being in the bomb shelter, and it was like a pajama party. I have shadow memories of sheets on the floor, candles. My parents were there, their friends were there, my friends were there. We were all in pajamas. And as far as I remember it, it was a lovely experience. We felt safe, and it's ironic, but that safety and that attachment to trauma, I think, was shaped by that. The next major force that influenced the somatic work that I do is quite an interesting story, which I will try to shorten. So with full disclosure, now I'm going to go back to the day that none of us will ever forget, 9/11. So my husband was on the floor of the stock exchange, and like many other people, I had no idea if he would ever return. When he finally walked in hours and hours later, covered with ash and soot from head to toe, we just sat for a while without speaking, taking in each other's presence. After a while, he got up, took a shower, and went to sleep. When he woke up the following day, he looked for his shoes. And when he found them, he burst into tears when he saw that they had been cleaned off. He literally shrieked like a wounded animal, said this was the only proof I have of what happened, and now it's gone. That was it. That's what he said. He walked around dazed, in acute shock, confused, and really walking into walls. But finally, after a number of weeks, he returned to his routine and went back to work. So where this comes into play in terms of somatic work is the following. I went with a group of clinicians to Israel. This was about a year after 9/11 to speak and learn from the top trauma specialists. I mean, like, they are traumatized and they deal with trauma all along. So why not go to the source? what happened was we then invited one of the speakers that we met to come to New York and do 3 trainings for us, for the clinicians that signed up. So the first training, my husband seemed very interested in the topic. I invited him to come with us, and reluctantly he agreed. So, brave man, because he was the only one in a room full of 30 clinicians. So I got to give him a lot of credit. Fast forward to a demo group that this person, Ronnie Berger, who had initiated what he called traumatic memory restructuring. He did a demo group about 9/11. And just to quickly tell you, my husband to join because it was an opportunity for him. And by the way, he never spoke about 9/11 after that initial piece for months. So he joined this group with 4 women mental health clinicians. And as the pictures were being shown on the screen, they were having a lot of reactions. And he sort of just, okay, he took it in. They then told some of their stories. They really got in touch with a lot of sadness, grief, and terror. And he just sort of sat there and finally said, you know, I don't get it. Why are they crying like this? I really don't get it. Well, that's how dissociated he was, okay? So here's the piece that took me into the somatic world. So the leader, Ronnie, asked Joe, as he was speaking, just to put his hands out like this, okay? And 2 minutes later, this is what happened. And he started to shake and tremble just like this. It looked like poltergeist had entered into his body. I was really scared of what was going on, but he was told just to let it happen, let the trembling go, and continue with it. And because he had the support, he wasn't as scared, but he wasn't as scared, but scared and curious. Now, he had had Lyme's disease, and this was an exact replication of all that trembling and shaking. It passed after a while, and then he accessed all the grief, all the sorrow, all the terror that he had been carrying in his body. And when I saw that, it still brings me to tears. I said, I get something really important here. With major shock trauma, there's got to be a high activation and a release, because if it's not done, then it'll stay internalized forever, especially in dissociation. So quickly, I went over to Ronnie and I said to him, so where'd you learn this? He wasn't an analyst or a therapist. He was actually a body worker. And he told me he took this thing for a year called somatic experiencing. Well, you can bet your life 5 minutes later, I went to Google and I signed up for the first East Coast training ever had. And that is what shaped my work and my life, and was a gift to my husband that I was so glad he could receive. So now, after hearing that story, I'm just going to invite you to do a short grounding or centering exercise, as we call it. I'd appreciate it if you sit comfortably, bring your awareness to your seat on the chair, and perhaps your chair has a back that you could lean into. Comfort is important, so please just sit as comfortably as you can. And now bring your awareness to your feet on the ground, and just feel the connection between the earth and the ground and you, and I invite you also to wiggle your toes as if you're sort of going through sand. And you can have an image of sand, which I often do, and just my toes going through them. And let's invite your awareness now to your seat on the chair, to the back support that you might be getting. And I invite you to close your eyes, sitting somewhat upright. Gently close your eyes, and we're going to do 3 deep breaths. I'm going to do it with you. I always do everything I ask a client or a patient to do, and I also enjoy doing this. So I'm going to just call the counts and ask you to come along with me. So now, to the count of 2, let's take an inhale. And to the count of 3, an exhale. And then another inhale to the count of 2, an exhale to the count of 3 again. And one more time, inhale to the count of 2 again, simply, and exhale to the count of 3. And as you finish doing this, the 3 breaths, I'm going to invite you to open your eyes gently and just follow my lead for another moment. Bear with me. And as you open your eyes gently, I'd like you to just move your head ever so slowly with your eyes open. And just like this, really very slowly, and let your eyes lead the way. And let them land on whatever they choose to land on. And then let's return to center. Again, very, very slowly. Your eyes wide open and leading the way. And then as you go to the range of motion, not anywhere past that at all, back to center. And that's the full extent of that. Now, what I would invite you to do is just notice, go inside and notice whether you experienced any shifts, slight, tiny shifts internally in your body. And if you would be kind enough to put that in the chat, just 1 or 2 words if you like, and I will invite Patricia to read some of the responses, and then we'll go on. So let's see if some people can put that in the chat. And Patricia, you'll let me know what comes in. And if you're ready, go ahead.
I noticed this tingling sensation as I opened my eyes and oriented to the far distance, felt heavier, felt tension in the face, felt more relaxed.
Tension and relaxed. That's an interesting
different people.
combination.
Yeah.
Oh, 2 different people. That's
Yeah.
great. And many of you may have noticed something. Many of you may not have noticed anything, but that's okay too. In this work, we're always, the languaging is invitational. There's no right or wrong. The body speaks when the mind cannot. And by the way, I use this when my patients arrive into the session, because whether they're actively hyper-aroused or not, I invite people to arrive and land softly with me I do this with them, and then we're good to go. So here already is a response to how do I start this work? And it's a very simple grounding exercise, and I really invite all of you to try it. And you don't need to say a lot about why. Our goal is to enable people to come into embodied presence, because embodied presence means being fully present, inhabiting your body fully in the here and now. And that is the road to healing and the foundation for a future. The here and now is our foundation for the future, which can be yet unimagined. The past is the past, and we work on putting the past back into historical memory. Now, if somebody's having flashbacks or anything like that, you start slowly and just invite one possibility or another. And part of this is I provide a lot of psychoeducation to everyone. Another time I might be able to show you right by the second session, I'm talking to people about the neurobiology of trauma. And I'm talking to them about the fight, flight, freeze response, arousal levels, fancy term, polyvagal theory, which is, I think, Sally, I believe you're going to cover that next time. So I'm not going to go into details about that now, but we're talking about the autonomic nervous system. And why is that so important? It's important because the brain does what it does and actually absorbs a lot and then gives out a lot. But the nervous system is what creates arousal or inhibition, not the brain. The nervous system responds to imagery, somatic imagery. So if you're talking to someone and asking them to imagine something or have a mental image in their mind's eye, your nervous system will respond, regardless of the fact that the brain knows it's not real. And that's a big wow. And that has to do with arousal levels and really educating people that their ups and downs, however they're experiencing, is not, it's not because they're doing something wrong. It's because it's biology speaking. And you have no idea what a relief that is to so many people. I draw it out, I show them where they are on a graph, and they often ask me to take it, if they can take it home. And I say, of course. I don't use charts, I use paper, pencil, in my childish handwriting. And regardless, it's really an experience when I do this. And that's a large part of this work. Whatever we do, we explain, we tell people why we're doing something, and we tell them there's no right or wrong. The body speaks, and the somatic narrative is what we're tracking, particularly in trauma when the story is not available often or words are not possible. In dissociation, embodied experiences are the only way in. Later, language can form, but when you catch somebody with a gesture or a shift, a slight shift, and you know what you're looking at, then it takes you to a whole different level. For example, I don't know how many of you know this, but shame shows up physiologically first. And when you understand what a shame response is, you understand where the tension is held, usually here and in the social engagement system. And in shame, people often put their eyes down, they look away a lot. You can see some flushing when they're feeling shame. And we don't go into the content at that point. We're interested in helping them recalibrate the nervous system, first and foremost, before any story is being told. So this somatic work is a part of trauma work. Now, after I went to this first training, I say I have been a training junkie ever since. I've taken lots of different trainings, body dynamics, et cetera, and my work right now is an integration and a compilation of all of these modalities into the psychodynamic work that I do. And at the end, I'll share a little vignette with you. Am I doing time-wise, guys? Thank you. All right, this slide talks about the impact of trauma, and it's truly a sense of dis-ease which remains, often without memory, desire. Trauma literally destroys the flow of time and the faith to go on being, and there is nobody home, there is no safety. Restoring people's connection to their own body invites and enables interconnectivity to flourish despite physical isolation. For example, I had a patient who said to me, you know, he was sitting, we were talking and working in this way, connecting him to some of his body states. And by the way, these are self states. Psychodynamically, we're talking about people entering different self states. And he said to me, you know, I feel like I've just gotten a non-touch hug. And my heart just opened up. It was so lovely. Now, I've gotten other responses that are not as lovely, but when you reach the heart area, that's what can happen. So the pandemic is truly a trauma in its own right, and I just wanted to say a couple of words about that. It's truly an experience in the present past, but it's still in the present. It's not over, guys. And what it does is open up all the unmetabolized, untranslatable, complex traumas, which all of us have had to contain, rework, and keep at bay over a lifetime. It's a shared collective traumatic experience, the pandemic, globally, and affects our subjectivities, our idiosyncrasies, our feeling of a place in the world. And it often takes us back to a state of early terrors and fears that have gone unnoticed. But that's where the triggers are. How many of you, if you can just by a show of hands, found people in the pandemic talking to you about 9/11? Or talking to you about other traumatic events that they've experienced. Trauma is built on trauma, and all these events are there. And when they come up, it's a ripe opportunity to delve into them with curiosity and no judgment. And that's the key in this kind of work. Okay, so trauma does live in the body, and it is truly a way of knowing, an implicit way of knowing what is yet unformulated and unknown. It's one of the most powerful pieces we have. Now, I just want to mention, we're talking about context. I want to mention to you, I had this conversation with someone recently. In Israel, the pandemic was received a little differently than in the United States. And what I mean by that is people suffered, they suffered a lot of financial difficulties and isolation, but they never felt truly isolated because the prevailing attitude to anybody I spoke to, I was here during part of the pandemic, the acute phase, anybody I spoke to said the same thing. We will get through it. We've been through worse. We will survive and we will emerge. I did not hear one negative thing, only that. Now, but the pandemic, the way we experienced it in other parts of the world and in the United States, was much more devastating, much more isolating, because you had people out here on their balconies singing to each other and playing music, and that sense of connectedness still stayed with people, as well as, here's the thing with Israelis, you know, Israel is built on loopholes. So here's what happened. The regulations were that you had to stay inside. You could only go outside to exercise and or walk a dog, period. Okay. The level of spandex in my neighborhood, the sales grew exponentially because people put on spandex. So they were exercising, so they were able to move about freely. I'd never seen anything like this. And the amount of dogs that people got and acquired is unbelievable. It had never been that way in Israel. So these are contextual differences. But in the United States,
You take a few deep breaths. And as you take a deep breath, bring in more oxygen, enlivening the body. And as you exhale, have a sense of relaxing more deeply. You can notice your feet on the floor. Notice the sensations of your feet touching the floor, the weight and pressure, vibration, heat. You can notice your legs against the chair, pressure, pulsing, heaviness, lightness. Notice your back against the chair. Bring your attention into your stomach area. If your stomach is tense or tight, let it soften. Take a breath. Notice your hands. Are your hands tense or tight? See if you can allow them to soften. Notice your arms. Feel any sensations in your arms. Let your shoulders be soft. Notice your neck and throat. Let them be soft. Relax. Soften your jaw. Let your face and facial muscles be soft. And notice your whole body present. Take one more breath. Be aware of your whole body as best you can. Take a breath. And then when you're ready, you can open your eyes.
What I love about this one, and I'm sure you've all felt some aspects of this, is the languaging. It says soften. And that to me gives people such a wide range of experience. You're not telling them exactly what to do, but when you say soften, everybody responds. They sort of innately know what that means. So I hope you guys experience that too. Now, I know we're running short on time, and I'm going to quickly
I think we have 5 minutes.
quickly go through some of these slides. With somatic experiencing, these are the elements that we talk about. These are bottom-up techniques. You can read the definition or how somatic experience presents itself, and 5 channels of experience: sensation, images, behavior, affects, and meaning. Now, in terms of affects, I call emotions affects in motion, because motion is the way emotions get expressed. They either through a facial gesture or through hands, through your limbs. If you're angry, you want to kick or some aspect like that. So movement is important in this kind of work too. And I often have people just stand up. One thing I'll quickly show you, we call these fear melters. So when somebody is in fear, one of the things that helps the most, and I learned this separately, is if you wiggle. They call it the fear wiggle. And I have a video of a woman standing online, very irritated, and all of a sudden she starts like this, wiggling, and everybody around her starts to dance at the same time. And it's contagious. You cannot shake your body and feel fear at the same time. It just doesn't work that way. So when you're in movement, your focus is different, and you can discharge a lot of the fear. Just like you can't relax and be anxious at the same time if you're truly relaxed. These are biological states that we all enter into. So I love this cartoon, and I know we have to but here's, in terms of interventions and applications, this is really important. All these elements are included in all the work and all the somatic practices. The psychoeducation, grounding, which you had an example of, movements, embodied action, because action is who we are. Movement is who we are. We are not meant to sit still like us crazy people who sit at the computer or the screen for 10, 12 hours. We're not meant to do that. Somatic imagery and the nervous system. And I had a few things I wanted to show you and do, but you'll have to just invite me back. Affects in motion, resourcing, which is hugely important. Never, ever start working with someone unless you know some of their resources, because we call upon those resources when the going gets rough. So it could be a person, it could be an object, and there are certain specific questions that we ask to bring people into resourcing. Then in trauma, important to know, orienting responses go offline. So somebody who's been highly traumatized can't orient in the same way to certain noises, or they're stuck in orienting. Like if someone is in a car accident and a car comes from the side, they get stuck in that state where their peripheral vision goes offline. And what happens is they converge and it creates tunnel vision. So their peripheral vision may be offline when they drive again and they won't even know it. So there are orienting ways, there are orienting exercises and response, very quick, very gentle, that can bring back the orienting responses online. So putting the pieces together, can I just share this vignette? Do I have permission? Is that a yes, Pat? Okay, so this is a clinical vignette, and I want to share it with you because it really is an integration of everything that's in the slideshow as well as what I've told you. So this is called The Deformed Baby. Anna, a 66-year-old woman, struggled with her right to exist. She was tormented by her lack of connectivity, while she at the same time defensively protected her space and privacy and fought the perceived enemy in others. She lived primarily in her head in a state of confusion. Her verbal narrative and dreams were chaotic, fragmented stories filled with childlike fantasies. In the second year of treatment, she brought in a dream of a deformed thalidomide baby covered by a red blanket. In her dream, she looked underneath the blanket and she sees that the baby has no hands and feet, just stumps. Now, as she's describing this image, she begins to frown, cringe, she twists her body, becoming agitated, and she starts to speak rapidly. And in a shrill voice, she says, "Maybe it's the baby I don't know about." What I did here is I paused, I took my own deep breath, I asked her if we could stay with the dream state together before speaking further. She nodded, and then I invited the baby in her to come out and play, in essence, to come into presence. And I asked the baby her to notice her hands, and I'm doing what I did with her and what she did, to notice her hands and to wiggle her toes and to gaze at her arms and her wrists, like in slow motion, like you see babies do when they don't know that their hand is part of them. And they just look at it like this, and I asked her just to follow, and then she took it on herself, and I kept doing it with her for a short time and in slow motion. And I moved my hands and my feet, mirroring her movements and gazing. And I was gazing with delight as she expanded and stretched her limbs like a newborn waking up gently out of sleep. And quietly, I asked her to notice the difference it makes in her experience and in her body as she moves and feels her own aliveness and wholeness and is welcomed by her adult self and by me. She smiles, she begins to breathe deeply, her eyes widen gently, and only then do we begin to talk about her as the dreamer and the dream with all of her associations and possible interpretations.
Wow, thank you, Debbie.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, we need to stop. Yeah, well, we need to stop, but we do have, I think, 5 minutes, 8 minutes for questions that you may have that I will translate to Abby. So please put them in the chat or comments that you have.
How do you get on the mailing list? You checked a box, I believe, when you registered that said you'd like to be on the mailing list. That puts you on the mailing list. Nothing more needs to be done. Great presentation. Yes, Evie. To join the task force, that's Jen saying just contact Maureen. You have her email. Thank you, Evie. You're terrific. Now you know why we love coming to our meetings. I mean, this is a group of people who are phenomenal, and Evie is part of it. Fantastic. This was great. Janet had a question. Her hand is raised. Janet, can you put it in the chat real quick, please?
Yeah, it's already there, Patricia. Thanks.
Oh, I didn't see it.
Okay, we'll just say it. Unmute her.
Yeah,
I'll say it.
Okay, just very quickly. And this goes to my question, and also it links in with a question by Elizabeth and Tiffany, actually. It goes to the issue of people with medical issues. Both I'm thinking about long COVID as well as non-COVID related illnesses. And two sets of questions. One has to do with when embodied presence itself is so painful, either because of illness or treatment side effects related illness, as well as, Elizabeth, I don't want to misquote your question, but I want to be sure that we get to it. Are there contraindications to somatic practices for people with medical illnesses? And Evie, I just want to say, I know you since 9/11 and our trauma days, and every time I'm with you, I continue to learn and be inspired by you. Thank you, sweetie. Love you
So much. So to answer your question, we do a lot of work with medical traumas, and when somebody is rushed into the hospital, let's say they've been in a car accident and rushed in, that is when it's contraindicated, because the problem is if you can get to the person before, if they're able, let's say they have a slighter accident and they're awake and able to respond, you can do this work before they go into surgery, because the school of thought is as you go into surgery, so you come out. And if you go in totally agitated, totally at loose ends, not knowing what's happening, not knowing who's going to do what to you, that's the way you're going to come out of the surgery. So we do a lot of prep work with people before surgeries. And I see Sally nodding, and because she will be speaking about some of this as well, the polyvagal theory that all goes into this. Is it contraindicated? What I would say is there are some people, for example, if you use the word body, they will go through the roof. Some people can't stand their bodies. They see it as the enemy. With those people, I would never use the word body. I would use your nervous system. That's much more palatable. And you have to know, obviously, the tolerance of the person you're working with. And this kind of work, you train people, because when people say, I don't know what I feel, they mean it. They really don't know what they feel. But if you can invite their curiosity about the sensations that they're noticing in their guts, in their heart area, over here, then sensations are the baseline of feelings. That's what feelings are. They start as sensations. Oh, so you notice that. Maybe that's something that you're actually feeling as well. And what would that sensation want to have? You talk to the body. The article that you're all going to get reading, it's called Hearing the Body's Truth. It's one of the best short articles I've come across. 3 steps to connecting to the felt sense. This is terrific. It's by Dan Levin. I got it years ago. It's your Bible to start this work if you're interested. And everything else is also available.
Evie, where can people go for more training?
Okay, so that's a longer question. I would love to tell you, first of all, there's somatic experience training that still goes on and has become more and more popular. So the modules are filled right now. But somatic experiencing, all you have to do is Google it. Then there's sensory motor psychotherapy. All you have to do is Google it. These programs are 2 years. My somatic experiencing program is 3 years. Now, it doesn't mean you're constantly meeting, but it means modules over 3 years. I myself have created supervision groups where I teach clinicians what they need to know in order to integrate this work into their actual therapy work. And that has been very powerful. Anybody who's been in that group, I would refer to them in a heartbeat because of how they learn to integrate it. So there are private groups you could go to. There is the big, somatic experiencing, sensory motor psychotherapy, body dynamics. But I would say I would start with one of the two if you're really interested in intense training. So far, so good. Yeah.
Thank you. We have several questions about sharing the slides. You all within a couple of weeks will receive a copy of this presentation, a video copy. So you will have that, and that will have on it the relaxation exercises that Evie did that some of you wanted separately. And Kurt Snyder, who's
anybody who wants to contact me privately for more information, please feel free to do so. All right, I'll give you my email address. It's dr.rapp@gmail.com. So please feel free to contact me. Go ahead, Kirk.
Yeah, and Kirk was late. He has a presentation coming up at 11:30, and he says, I do think it's possible to feel a degree of anxiety while being completely relaxed, but that's another conversation.
Yeah, that's the good anxiety that you're talking about, Kirk, in your presentation. And by the way, get his new book. It's fabulous.
Yes. So any other questions or anything that hasn't been addressed that someone wants to put in here? Evie's email.
Patricia Sally has her hand raised. Patricia Sally.
Hey, Sally. Did you want
If that's okay to just add something to what Evie was saying about the modifications for people who have medical illnesses. Obviously, if you have long COVID or other similar medical illnesses, you do need to be mindful of the physical symptoms and limitations. So for example, if someone has long COVID, they probably have POTS. So getting them to stand up is not going to be a thing. They're not going to be able to wiggle, sadly. So it's more kind of a different, it's the same approach, but maybe further back because the person is more chronically in the free state.
And that's where imagery, Sally, that's where imagery comes into play, because you can do a lot with somatic imagery, with movement and imagery. So even if they can't move, they can imagine.
Absolutely.
So thank you for that. That's great.
And Sally, thank you for mentioning POTS. Shelby is very happy about that. And please, Shelby, come in 2 weeks to Sally's talk, for another free webinar that our group is offering. And you'll learn more about POTS and polyvagal theory and hear from Sally, who's just wonderful. And that has been put in the chat, the link to that. But again, if you said you'd like to know more, you will get a flyer on the upcoming talks, all of them. So, yay. Breathtaking, Evie, just breathtaking.
Thank you
So much.
There's so much more I wanted to share with you, but hopefully I will next time.
Yes, please come back.
Yes, absolutely, Evie. I'm reading things in the chat saying, please bring her back for part 2. So
Be my pleasure.
you have a lot of support for that, and thank you so much. This was just really, such a nice combination of the intellectual, conceptual understanding and the experiential piece.
And it's only the tip of the iceberg, may I say.
Absolutely.
So maybe there'll be a part 3, not just a part 2.
Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? And
something I want to add on our website, we are creating a YouTube channel, and Evie will be doing some, very brief modules on that.
I already have one on the YouTube that they can look up.
Yeah, and at some point they'll be attached to our website.
Yes, that's
links,
great.
right.
And hopefully there will be more.
Yeah.
Yes, and our website will have videos of other presentations from the past as well. So if you're new to the group and you're wondering what we've been doing, when we get the YouTube channel up, which is in the process of being put up, you'll be able to go back and see other presentations that have been done. And again, we welcome you. We welcome you to join in this effort of making sense of what is happening in healthcare, in addiction care, all due to the force of COVID, and within a strength-based framework. So, and here you have, just contact Maureen, coronapsych20@gmail.com. So any other further comments or questions? They're terrific. Tamara?
Well, I'm reading Sally saying that she feels better in her body right now.
Oh, that's-
Yay!
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Sharing.
Actually, fabulous. Not better, fabulous.
Great. Great.
Do you want to say something? I'm sorry, do we have time? Okay, I'm willing to stay on a little bit longer, so that's fine, if it's possible, but
I was muted. I'm sorry, I didn't put it in the chat. But all along, I was very struck by your very, very first anecdote having to do with your feeling safe in a bomb shelter.
Yeah.
And then it occurred to me to wonder whether you find any differences, cultural and otherwise differences, when you work with people in Israel,
Yes.
Israelis, and people who have been not only traumatized in different ways than we have, but also in terms of linguistic capacity, in terms of their all around experience in that culture, as opposed to the West, as opposed to us.
well, let me tell you, being human is being human wherever we are. So there's that aspect to people all along. There are different contextual pieces here, but there's a huge somatic experiencing group here, and this is the work they do in trauma as well. So the work applies across the board. I happen to be fluent in Hebrew, so I can speak in Hebrew too, and that's of course a big help. But most people speak English. So anyway, but the reality is that, like I said to you, in the attachment issues is where I find some contextual differences. And if you've noticed, when I was doing the piece before, when I shared the vignette, I said I looked at her with delight, and her adult self could perceive herself with delight. We all have a child state within us, and we all have an adult self who can observe if we work with the child state. So, and that's universal. That's really universal. And a lot of this work can be done non-verbally too. So that's another big possibility. And there's more, but I think that sort of speaks to what you're asking about.
Well, thank you so much, Evie. It's been a fantastic talk. I look forward to your next ones.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So any other comments or questions before we conclude today? To be continued?
Great.
No? Well, look forward to seeing you all in 2 weeks with Sally, and look forward to any new members joining us next week. So thank you.
Thank you so much to all of you. I really appreciate the feedback. And like I said, it's only the tip of the iceberg. So stay tuned.
Yes. And Evie, we have greatly appreciated your involvement with our group.
Thank you.
for-
Like I said, I feel privileged to be part of it.
Mhm.
Okay. So from here, I will say what we say in Israel, and it doesn't matter if you're religious or not, or observant or not. Everybody says Shabbat Shalom, which
Shalom.
means, and I share that with you. And thank you. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you.
Shabbat shalom to everybody.
Thank you.
Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Thank you so much.